Turn It On, the Level 42 fan podcast, is in no way affiliated with the band. The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed are solely the speaker's own.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Welcome to Turn It On, the Level 42 podcast. We are here in our typical trio from here in the U.S., here to talk the time away with all things Level 42. Mikey Payne, say hello.
Hello.
The irrepressible Winston M. Walker, Windman with many faces and many names. Please say hello.
Oh, that was amazing. Hello, everyone.
And I'm Bob Considine, also saying hello to all the Level 42 fans out there, past, current, and future from all over the world. We appreciate you being here. So, Mikey and Winston, before we get to our special guest today, I know we've had some loose discussion about today's episode, but I'm going to call an audio on two matters. Audible, I should say. We're going to call an audible on two matters. One is we're recording this today is Veterans Day here in the U.S. So, as you have both wonderfully served our country, I would like to very heartfully thank you for your service, and thanks for being fine, upstanding young gentlemen.
Thank you very much, Bob.
You're
That's
welcome.
really kind of you. Thank you. You're welcome.
Okay. And two, I'm going to put you both on the spot, as this is the Level 42 podcast. What is the Level 42 song of the week that you either listened to or somehow invaded your cranium throughout the ether and never left this week? And if you don't know, I'll go with mine first, and you guys can think about it.
Follow Me off Physical Presence. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Did you hear it, or did you just come in?
No, listened to it twice this week and blasted it, and a song that was far underrated, in my opinion.
And you know what was amazing me about that song, Mike, is the keyboard playing.
Yeah.
Mike Glendup is doing about 12 different things at once in that song. All different time signatures, too, which is pretty crazy.
Yeah, and it's sort of interesting because that's one of the last singles that they kind of created right before Something About You kind of hit it. So it was kind of a interesting transition song from the old to the new in that one for me.
Yeah, very, very good point. I forgot that was the last single before they broke big, really.
Yeah.
What about you, Winston?
Because I had a birthday recently, Turn It On.
Happy birthday.
Because I was looking for, thank you. I was looking for I was looking through some pictures on my computer, and I found a photo, and one of the photos had the Star Child single that had Turn It On the flip side, and that Turn It On was really the song that made me search out other stuff by the band, even though Star Child was the first song that I heard. So,
right.
So that's been running around in my brain the last week or so.
And it has nothing to do with that this is the title of the podcast, Turn It On, either?
No, but just that's the one that did it for me, that, so.
Plug.
Yeah, I thought of that.
Shameless. For me, it's been Good Man in the Storm, but that's a lot of people's favorites. But for me, it's the live version of Eternity Live.
Yes.
I love the intro of that song, and it's a song that I'm sure we'll have further conversations on as we go forward with the podcast. But it's just one that they, for so many years, never played live.
I think that's one of those tunes, Bob, that almost every fan loves. I've never heard anyone say anything negative about that song in particular.
Yeah,
I think that probably song unites everybody.
Yeah, and there's something. I was going to say a bad pun, and I didn't mean. There's something about it. I just, there's just some poignancy to that song that kind of resonates with everybody. So that's where we are. Those are the songs running through the Level 42 brain this week from us here at Turn It On. And I think now it's time to introduce our very special guest. Yeah, this gentleman has attended 72 Level 42 concerts over the past 42 years in 5 different countries, including some of the band's very first gigs. So if there's anyone who could serve as the Level 42 encyclopedia, it is this person. And for our younger listeners, an encyclopedia is a set of books that provides information on many subjects, often arranged alphabetically. So here to tell us about every single song at every single concert he went to is Mr. Julian Hall. Julian, thanks so much for being here.
Hello, welcome. Oh, hello from sunny Hornchurch in Essex, England. Nice to join you guys.
Nice to see you.
Hey, welcome, Julian.
All right, Julian, thanks so much for being here. Before we get started on kind of the level 42 shows of the past, I understand you have been to one show, or maybe more than one, on the current Living It Up tour. What can you tell us about it, and where were you?
Okay, originally I was just going to go to one, which was Cliff's Pavilion in Southend. I've probably seen them there, I don't know, 5, maybe 6 times at that actual gig. Mark always sort of regards that end of the world as being a real, not just for me and the Havering Funkfuls, but you know, Essex was pretty big into the jazz, funk and soul scene back in the early 80s, and he's always sort of regarded it as an area that he likes coming back to. In fact, at Cliff's, he actually gave the Havering Funkfuls a shout out in between 2 of the tracks, which after 42 years to still get a bit of recognition is absolutely awesome in my book.
That's amazing.
It really was pleased that he mentioned us. I succumbed to Mark's great salesmanship though, because I'd been following obviously all of the group in Ultimate 42, and everybody kept saying, he's not saying see you in 2 years. And he's tugging his shirt on next to his heart going, I love you all, you're fantastic, look after yourselves. So, and I was convinced when he didn't say anything at Cliff's Pavilion that they were going to stop the end of the big tours. I think, you know, I thought they'd still do the festivals, and maybe like the one a couple of years ago was only 5 or 7 nights. But I didn't think, to be fair, also, I kind of thought Mark's voice, I don't know if he can take doing sort of 30 gigs in 2 months. I was dead convinced that this was going to be the end of the big gig. So I got myself and my wife 2 tickets to go to Hammersmith, but boy, am I pleased I went. When I did Cliff's and Royal Albert Hall in the last tour, for me, I always get down the front at Cliff's and at Royal Albert Hall, and I did this at the same at Hammersmith Apollo this gig. I actually sit, and so I get a completely different view. One right up the front, obviously getting great footage from my YouTube followers, and the other one is more taking in the light show and particularly watching the horn section, because they always dance about, and obviously most people are focusing on Mark or Mike or even Pete because of his drumming skills. You see them in the background, whereas when you're actually up in the seats, you notice them more, and they do have great fun. They're moving from side to side, they're joking with each other, and I said, so for me, both those gigs had different things to see. But the ultimate thing at Southend, Mark didn't do a particularly long solo in Love Games, whereas at Hammersmith Apollo, oh my God, the solo with him and the interaction with Pete, it was worth every penny of the ticket just for those 4 or 5 minutes, in my opinion.
Fantastic.
That is great. Awesome.
I've seen some of those solos, and I'm really, really jealous, because that's pretty amazing stuff.
Mark seems to be really throwing himself in the bass solo this tour than he has the previous tours. Definitely.
And I think from what I've seen, obviously we haven't been to them, but he's made it as part of the song Love Games, right? And it's definitely an unusual approach versus the kind of cut off bass solo. It's in the middle of a song and one of their biggest songs. So pretty cool stuff.
Yeah, as I said, I totally enjoyed it at Hammersmith, and there was various comments again in Ultimate 42 about how everybody was going on about Love Games prior to me going to Southend. So if anything, I was slightly disappointed he didn't go into it there. But as I said, having gone to a second concert now in this particular tour, yeah, it was definitely worthwhile to see that difference. And you know, I mean, I bumped into Lisa Devlin, Sue Diaska, many others, Raymond Pursued, who had, you know, gone, well, certainly Sue and Lisa had gone to 5, 6 different concerts. And I remember back in the early, I think it was 81, I went to 3 concerts in 1 week. And I was on my local radio station about 2 years ago, and they said, well, why'd you do it? Because surely you're going to see the same set and the same songs. And I said, you're right. But in my 3 going back in 81, on the way to University of East Anglia, we lost our way to where it was, and we stopped and asked this a guy from Norfolk, you know, where is the University of East Anglia? And he went, well, you go round that roundabout down the road. And that gig, I actually remember more about this guy, his very Norfolk broad accent, than the actual gig itself.
Right.
At Ipswich, which was, I think, either the next day or the day before, we arrived late, and I managed to push my way down to the front. I think Mark had just finished the 3rd song. He saw me and went, Jules, you're late tonight. So that's what I remember that gig from. Hammersmith was where Mark, we went backstage prior to the gig, and that's when I swapped T-shirts with Mark and got his Level 42 T-shirt. We presented him with a Havering Funkfuls T-shirt, and he wore it on stage for the whole gig. Now, I got to tell you,
that's unreal.
How many superstars, if you like, would wear one of their fans' T-shirts on stage for a whole concert?
The one thing I wanted to ask Julian is, you know, when you go to gigs today and, you know, you've got 42 years of, you know, experience, do you kind of go back to those days in your mind when you're at the shows now? Like, are there constants that you're reminded of back then that happen still today?
No, because obviously the fact that you've now got that brass section. So today, you know, from however long they've now been, I think they've all been together now since, is it about 2012, if I remember rightly? So as the format now, I think it's been going, well, certainly with Sean Freeman anyway, and then obviously Dan and Nicole joining. So I know it's a different concert because of the extra people involved, you know, taking away the fact that obviously Boone and Phil aren't there. I know it's a different concert. It's Level 42, and they're going to do the songs that, particularly in this tour just gone, I was so pleased to see, you know, Love Meeting Love and tracks like Almost There, you know, those tracks. Yeah, I suppose that question you're asking me, is it as good as seeing those tracks? Well, obviously back then the band was so raw, you know, it is a more polished presentation, if you like, now, because that's the way things have gone. Sounds, you know, the sound systems are obviously a lot better. You know, when I first met them, you know, they were 4 guys, three of them from the Isle of Wight, that were beginning to sort of tour around places, and everything was new to them. But what made me start following them was the pure exhilaration, I suppose is a really good word. You know, you were standing there and you just saw these guys giving 120% to even though the first gig I went to, I would say there was 80 people in the crowd, they still gave it everything that they had. And I think there was either 8 or 10 of us, the Havering Funkfuls. And essentially what happened was that they finished the gig, and I asked one of the stagehands, do you mind if we go back, you know, can you just ask them if we can come and say hello to them? When we got backstage, it was them asking us about us and not us asking about them. You know, Mike, Boone, Phil, they were like, oh my God, if you guys hadn't come to this gig tonight, it would have been so boring. You know, what's all this Havering Funkfuls last? And essentially all it was I lived in Hornchurch, one of my mates lived in Harold Hill, and another one lived in Upminster, but we were all within that borough of Havering. So we just decided to call ourselves the Havering Funkfuls. We all had black T-shirts with, you know, a Havering Funkfuls on the back and our names on the front. And they were like, well, what's all this then? And, you know, that's basically where it all began. You know, that they were so interested in who we were and what we were doing.
Yeah, that doesn't happen every day, for sure.
No.
Awesome.
You kind of just said it. But I wanted to see if you could describe what the vibe was in the early gigs. You know, how did the band sound? You said they were really raw. You know, what was the reaction of the crowd, and who back in Britain's 1981, who would have gone and seen Level 42?
Right. Well, I mean, as I said, we were heavily into jazz, funk, and soul. We used to go to what's called the Case to Soul weekend. So essentially, Level 42 didn't really, you know, if you're looking at sort of like Shack Attack, if you like, which I know that they did play on one bill together. I think that was at Hammersmith Palais or something like that. Light of the World, you know, groups like that. Technically, they were not, I can't call it jazz funk, but they, because of Mark's bass, they almost had their own little niche, if you like. But every DJ or whatever still sort of banded them as jazz, funk, and soul.
Right.
So I think you got the people that possibly weren't 100% into being, you know, everything being jazz, funk, and soul, coming to these gigs because they were slightly outside of that. You know, I mean, certainly wouldn't to say a rock band, but because of, you know, Boone's guitar playing, the bass going, they were, technically of their own niche, in my opinion. And there's the fan club, or those fans that turned up in those days I think they were just pleased to see something slightly off the charts of what everybody else was doing.
More original, in a sense.
Yes, I believe so. Yeah.
And you also just said, you know, you were really, I can't imagine, it would have been amazing. You were really fortunate to meet Mark, Mike, Phil, and Boone. I was just curious, what were your initial impressions of them, you know, when you interacted with them? And did you really think that Level 42 then would make it, you know, quote, make it big?
Probably not at the time, because, as I said, they had this slight niche element of what they were doing at the time. But obviously, as the years went on, you know, when you start going to Living It Up, Lessons in Love, obviously they're different from what they started as, and that's potentially why the fallout happened with Phil, because he didn't want them to become a slightly more commercial band. But obviously Mark was technically already sort of, you know, taking the helm, if you like, again, in my opinion. And of course, particularly when Paul Crockford got involved, it was all about taking them into the charts and making them, you know, a much more followed band. So I said, the earlier days, there was definitely a slightly different crowd from when everything started hitting, you know, when they were selling out Wembley to, what is it, 10,000 people? You know, as I said, my first gig was 80.
Right.
Wow.
Julian, like you're talking about, you're there for kind of the transition of the band going from kind of small clubs to big arenas and things like that. Both for you personally and your crowd when you started, was there a sense of, oh my gosh, we're losing these guys a little bit, they're going to become a huge band, we're not going to have them to ourselves anymore? Was that a part of the thinking going on during that time?
No, two things about that, and this makes me feel fantastic still. If I see Mike, I saw in, funny enough, both gigs, I happened to see him. You know, he still says, "Hi, Julian, how are you?" There is no difference for my relationship personally with anyone in the band than it was in 1981. You know, I know that,
I was going to say not really personally. I was just talking about the musical direction. Was there any kind of feeling from the hardcore who had been there at the beginning that we're going to lose these guys? It's not going to be the same, I guess.
There's possibly some fans that may have drifted off when they started to go more commercial. I'd got to such a point that if they chucked out Nelly the Elephant with a bass line to it, I would have still gone and bought the single and bought the 12-inch and then bought the picture disc, because I was so immersed in the band now. So it didn't. Yeah, it got to a point where it kind of didn't matter what they produced. I was, you know, I was in for everything. So for me personally, it didn't really matter anymore.
That's great. That's great.
You know.
Yeah, I had a question, and I had to put on my headphones, so I might have missed something. I'm curious, what was the first song that you heard by the band, or did you see them live at a show and then get into the band?
Right. Well, how this all started was around January or February '81. I walked into my sister's bedroom, and she was playing a 12-inch that had a blue and yellow label in the middle. And I walked in and I said, "Oh, blimey, who's this? I really like this." And she said, "Oh, it's a new band called Level 42. And about 6 weeks later, I happened to be looking through the Ilford recorder and spotted a really small advert that said Level 42 were playing at Redbridge Tech. So essentially, my sister is actually to blame for the 71 gigs and the 42 years later. But yeah, I sort of go. So
what was that song?
Sorry,
what was the song that she was playing?
Love Meeting Love.
Oh, awesome.
That was the blue and yellow, right, Julian?
Yeah, that was on Elite Records.
Yep.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
That's great.
So it was actually her, and then fate took its hand. I happened to spot this very small advert. I thought, oh yeah, that's that band I liked when, you know, when I walked into my sister's bedroom. And essentially, that is the start of it all.
You know what's amazing, Julian, is you hear that song, and you know it's a ballad, really. Love Meeting Love. That's that's your first introduction to them, and then you go to see them for the first time, maybe with no preconceived notions, and properly have your face melted off by these guys playing 100 miles an hour. You know, I wonder if it was a big surprise, if you even remember your first reaction to them playing.
Well, as I said, all I can remember is us 8 or 10 of us all sort of jumping up and down and giving a bit of whoa, whoa, whoa. And I think, as I said, that's what also made us sort of stick out from these 80 odd people. You know, we were 10% of the audience, and the others were at the back of the hall drinking 50p pints, because it was it's not even a uni. I mean, it's a technical college. It's not a university.
Right.
And I said, we're up the front, you know, responding to them. And I think, as I said, that's why I think they were so pleased when we went backstage to chat to us, because we'd fed off their energy, but we'd given it back to them.
Yep. No, that's great. It's amazing stuff.
Yeah, I didn't get to hear that song until years later.
Yeah.
You know, for me, it was Star Child. Maybe a year later, I flip it over and hear Turn It On, and then I go, ooh, I got to find the album. And I didn't, the first album I found was The Pursuit of Accidents. And then at that point, I was like, oh, I'm getting everything I can find. And that's probably when I was able to get Love Meeting Love, you know. But that's an amazing story, because I don't know if I've ever had an experience of seeing a band that I love that early in their career. You know, they were pretty much, when I went to concerts as a kid, pretty much just established bands who had a few releases, maybe a few albums, you know, big on the radio here in America or the New York area where I grew up. So that's pretty amazing.
Well, funny enough, at Cliffs, I stood next to a guy called Dave Redden, who was a member of the Havering Funk Force. And he seems to think that when we saw them at 06 in Southend at the end of '81, again, when we were backstage, they were showing us either an album cover or 12-inch cover, and I think it was actually the lady logo that they were, and we sort of said, oh no, the one with the lady logo. You know, whether we had any influence on it. But again, you know, it was that early, you know, that, as I said, they hadn't even sort of got to that stage, I think, of you know, putting everything together. And I said, I personally don't recall that, but I said, Dave reminded me, and he's adamant about it when I saw him at Southend, that they were showing us, you know, like an album cover or a 12-inch cover, and saying, you know, which one do you think is going to be better? But I said, to be honest, I couldn't remember which song it was.
Right.
You know, it's amazing,
Fantastic.
Julian. I was thinking that you've been one of the few people who have seen like songs like "Nothing More to Say" live. You know, these are things that we only have through the miracle of cassette tape. I feel like you don't recall like a song like sticking out that you no longer hear, do you? Do you actually remember "Nothing More to Say" being played?
No, no, I can remember. And I will give Mike a plug here because obviously his YouTube channel throws out all of these early gigs in their entirety. You know, so Mike, thanks
Right.
for what you do on your YouTube channel
Absolutely.
for promoting the band, and but you again take me in particular back to some of the gigs that I was at, and and again I will just go back to that word pure energy because that's what it was. It was they were just enjoying themselves, so we were enjoying ourselves in the audience. It's simple as that.
Amazing. I gotta ask you, Julian, what's your favorite album?
Well, probably the early tapes.
Favorite tune?
Fun enough, well, it's definitely Love Games, 100%, purely because for them also it was now a turning point for them. Also, we always, when Mark goes, as I watched your face, we would always go, whoa, and Mike, you've listed the Woolwich show that was obviously recorded for Pursuit of Accidents, but I've listened to the whole thing, and if you listen to that in Love Games, you can hear us going whoa when likewise, I think what was it? So it was the Coronet at Woolwich, wasn't it? And then Reading. I think I've even heard us on that one as well, but only when you uploaded the whole of the gigs.
You should have gotten credit for that, Julian.
The physical presence shows, yes.
That's right.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that was my first live, besides like a dodgy bootleg cassette I bought through Record Collector magazine.
Oh, yeah.
I got that album, and I was just, that was the first true live experience, other than, the odd B-side live track that they threw out, but just to hear a full gig in really good quality, that just blew me away.
I got to ask Julian, I'm sorry to trip over you there, Mike.
Oh, you're fine. Go ahead.
Was there a favorite show of yours? Maybe Mike was actually going to ask this, and maybe a least favorite.
Blimey. Right. Well, there's not a least favourite because they've all been brilliant.
Of course.
Well, it has to be the Hammersmith, at the end of '81, where I'm watching the guy and I've got photos of Mark King when he turns his back with Havering Funkfuls on the back of his T-shirt. So that has to be for not just for me, but for the other guys in our tribe. That's got it has to be the biggest memory for all of us. He's standing there playing his bass guitar wearing a Havering Funkfuls T-shirt.
That is incredible. That is really incredible.
So I just want to drill down on something. So you hear this record in your sister's bedroom, you find this gig listed, and that first gig you go to, you guys had already organized your Funk Force?
Yes, funny enough, that only started 2 months before that, about February '81. So we'd only just got our T-shirts printed, near enough, probably a couple of weeks before the gig. So essentially, all that happened was if you went to, let's say, when we used to go to 06, we'd all be wearing our T-shirts. But if you went to the Caister Soul weekends, there was loads of people with different posses. I think the Brixton Frontline, I think, was one of the biggest. I think there was Funkmaster Generals. There was these were much bigger troop posses than us.
Wow.
Because we at our peak, I think, had about 26 members, whereas these other ones, the Funkmaster, you were probably talking 50 to 60 people, you know, and to walk into a big auditorium where there's all these tribes with their different t-shirts, different banners, but the thing is, like everything with music, we were all one.
Right.
You know, it wasn't like, you know, I walked into a West Ham auditorium wearing an Everton shirt.
Right.
Yeah, you don't want to do that. Definitely don't want to do that.
You know, you know, we all had our own tribes, but we were there for the music, and we'd all, you know, embrace each other and, you know, chat to it. It was just a family. Chris Hill used to call us the family. And that's exactly how it was going to these bigger soul weekends and whatnot. Everybody was happy just to chat to each other, a bit like, you know, the gigs for me now. I get to be fair, I didn't get to Hammersmith until about 7:30, but no, maybe it's about 6:30. But certainly at Southend, I get there about 4 because there's a whole load of people. Andy and Sue Jackson, I said Sue Diaska, I mentioned her earlier. Yes. Jackie Lawrence. There's a whole load of us that meet up, sit down, and talk level 42 stuff.
Yeah, that's a lot of the fun of it too. It's like, yeah, you're going to experience the band, but you get to catch up with a lot of old friends that you've met over the years. So that's a big part of it.
Yeah, and we're talking years now too, aren't we?
Yeah. Absolutely, yeah. But the one thing I found at Hammersmith was, because I was sitting upstairs, I got myself quite a good viewpoint. In where I was sort of viewing from there was in between 2 aisles, if you like, so I had a nice view down. But what I've discovered is, bearing in mind the average age of the level 42 audience is between 55 and 60 probably, they can't sit for an hour and a half without going to the toilet anymore. I've already posted a couple of clips. I did actually start a second YouTube channel called Original Soul Boy, and I've put 2 clips on there where they end after about a minute and a half because somebody walked straight in front of the camera, and all I've got is this silhouette of this person rather than seeing anything of the band.
Well, as long as you get the music, that's hilarious. Yeah, that would be me. Like, I would have to, no pints before the gig because I don't want to have to get up.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with a diaper, fellas. You could just bring it. I just wanted to ask Julian, had you gone to the Mike Linda show that he did at Spiritland, King Cross?
Yes. So again, that was really nice. I think there was about 75 people. That's all. Right. I will tell you something funny that happened to me in a minute. But what a result! The fact that Mark was there as well. Yeah. He was quite good in the respect that he stood at the back and he actually left before Mike finished, so that obviously everybody would then speak to Mike and not carry on going over to Mark at the end, which I thought was quite respectful, actually. Yeah,
fair play.
But I've got to tell you, so Omar is obviously on one of the tracks with Mike. And I thought, oh, okay, I've never spoken to this bloke before. I'll go over. And I know he does... he's done a remix of Living It Up, and to be fair, I actually quite like the remix. So I go over and I said, "Oh, my name's Julian. I just wanted to say I really like your remix of Living It Up." And I said, "Oh, how does this happen? Who calls who? You know, how do you get to do these things?" And he started to talk to me, and he told me about this and that. And then I said, "Oh, I listened to your show on Magic Soul as well." And he looked at me. He went, "I don't know what you're talking about."
Oh boy.
I think this conversation's ended, and luckily somebody else was standing next to me who then sort of butt in and started. So I just wandered off. Anyway, when I got home that night, I looked up DJs in Magic Soul, and it's Lamar.
Common misconception, Julian. Common misconception.
So I am going to see Mike at Jazz Cafe on December the 16th, and I know there was quite a few people, a bunch in at Hammersmith Apollo that I know are going to see that as well. Yeah. So again, this time, whether I speak to Omar again, I don't know.
I bet he remembers you now.
Yeah. Oh yeah, he'll be looking at me going, "Oh, it's that twat again."
He'll put on a name tag.
Julian, if you could select any song that's never been played live before, what track would it be? I'm really curious to hear your choice.
Gosh, the problem is there was a bit of a discussion about whether something had been played or not. You're asking me a question without looking back, going back and finding out which ones haven't been. That book, I can't remember the chap's name that listed near enough every song. That was quite interesting, to be fair. And I wish I'd prepared myself. It said there was a guy that produced a book about a year and a half ago that listed every song and gave you the sort of background of when it was played and everything.
Right. Yeah.
Yes, it's On Track.
On track.
On Track, level 42, every album, every song by Matt Phillips.
That's the one. Yes. Now, to be fair, I actually went fishing one afternoon and pretty much ploughed my way through that, and again found that quite interesting. But I can't, the problem is you're asking me a question. I'd need to actually go back and find out which songs hadn't been played live to answer the question.
I have one that as a follow-up. Then this one you probably will know. What song do you won't care if you don't ever hear it again live?
Well, I suppose Rocket.
I like Rocket. I don't know. I don't know. I don't know why there's so much. There's a lot of people who feel that way, Julian, and I actually kind of like that song. Well, I'm in the minority on that, I think.
You are, at least here you are. Well, I'll be honest. I was at that Reading gig that they recorded for the DVD. I was never a fan of Sunbed Song on the record. Never cared for it. I mean, didn't dislike it, but not a track I would skip, but not one that I would ever put the record on to hear specifically. But when they played it live, I fell in love with it. So you never know what you're gonna, because that's a case for me of a song that I didn't really care for, but when I heard it live, I'm like, ooh, they really did this one great, and now I like it. So
I love that song.
I actually do like that song, and I actually, funny enough, from that concert, I actually like that version that I've heard. Very annoying that the security again told everybody I wasn't at that gig, and I would have been bloody annoyed if I had, because I, going to a level 42 concert, you want to get up and dance and sing.
Exactly.
I would just say this about that show. I remember going into it. It was kind of seemed like a sort of a church vibe as far as the venue, the way it looked inside. I sat almost in the last row. Not a big venue, but I noticed that the audience was a lot older than me.
Wow.
So I didn't get the impression that, and it was all seats. There wasn't an area to stand up. But I do remember there were not a ton of people attempting to stand up and being told to sit down. Maybe like a row and a half of people. So I kind of get amused when people, whenever that comes up, they're like, oh, the security. Yeah, it wasn't like there were 60 people trying to stand up and dance. It was like maybe 20 people. And, but I didn't get the impression that these older folks, and they were, I'm 60 now. I was not 60 then, obviously. Right. So I didn't get the impression they were going to be up and dancing and partying. And obviously with it not being having an area right in front of the stage where people could do that, it's probably like, hey, you're blocking the view of all these old people who can't stand up. So, but I get it, but I enjoyed that show so much. So it didn't bother me that people weren't able to dance, but I wasn't a guy that was at the front that I would have that opportunity anyway.
Well, they probably shouldn't have given communion in the middle of that show either.
That was good because the old folks needed a break. So
right. Hey, Julian, just kind of looking forward for you. What do you have any goals? I mean, is there something you haven't done in terms of seeing the band, or a venue you haven't seen? Do you want to get to 100 shows? What's your end game here?
Right. Well, certainly the Paradiso. Every time Keith Riley goes, he again queues at God knows what time to get to the front. But the Paradiso, unlike a lot of gigs that like even at Southend, although I was at the front, they put a barrier, so there is this gap that a photographer can walk backwards and forwards, and security or whatever can get to anybody. Whereas Paradiso, certainly from what Keith sent me pictures of, he's looking up Mark's nostrils. He's so close to the action. So Paradiso would definitely be something I'd definitely like to get there. I mean, I went to Utrecht in April 1982, and fun enough, I was actually mentioned in the fan club letter for making the journey over, which was very, very nice. I met both Rhea and Pia actually at that gig.
That's amazing.
Wow, you said Utrecht. I'm thinking 90s, but like 82. Wow, yeah,
that's
amazing. That is. I think when I saw them in California during their last tour, one of the shows, the Belly Up gig, was the stage was maybe a foot off the ground, and we were right up against the stage, so anyone could have literally just jumped on the stage. So I have pictures of that, and it's like, I could reach out and touch, Nathan or Sean. That's how close you were. That was a great experience. That's awesome. Wow, you were traveling to other countries that early in the career of the band. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, as I said, obviously, this relationship was forming, where, as I said, pretty much I said whatever they played, you'd be there. And funny enough, all that happened because I'd been, again, back to my sister. She lived in the south of France for an entire summer in '81, and I met a Dutch guy called Ronald, who was a Level 42 fan already. And he said, do you want to come over to see them in Utrecht? And he lived in Rotterdam, and put me up for a couple of nights. So, again, wow, the camaraderie of the Level 42 fans was evident going back 40 years, years, let alone what it's like nowadays.
Julian, I've got a trivia question for you. See if you know this. What cover song did Level 42 play at their debut gig in 1981?
That's a great question, Mike.
Right. Well, I know they throw in a Cream song, don't they, quite often in the middle of Almost There and a couple other songs. So, because I know they were very influenced by Cream, I'd have to go with Cream.
I have a guess.
Yeah, go on, Bob.
Was it Haunted House, Lee Oscar?
Exactly, Haunted House, Lee Oscar. Yes.
Wow, pretty cool.
Yeah. So I was just curious if you heard that in one of the early shows, Julian. Haunted House by Lee Oscar.
I don't recall it.
And the last thing I wanted to ask you, Julian, is what, considering the last 41, 42, 43 years, what has Level 42 meant to you?
Well, believe me, when I went to the Redbridge Technical College, I never thought I'd be talking to people in America on a podcast 42 and a half years later.
Right.
Travelled to Holland, Germany, Belgium, and I said the gig in Miami was pure fluke. I happened to be driving down the freeway just outside Miami, and I saw a big billboard because I'd been abroad. I lived in Spain and Tenerife for most of half of 85, all of 86, and half of 87. So technically, I'd stopped, receiving fan club letters, and when it went AWOL a little bit. But said driving down this freeway, there was a big billboard saying Tina Turner playing at the Miami Bowl, I think it was, and down below in smaller letters, supported by Level 42.
Yep.
So I managed to get 2 tickets. Well, no, I was on my own actually. I managed to get a ticket on my own. But one of their stage hands called Dave, I recognised him, went up and I said, "Hey Dave, how you doing?" Blah 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 blah. He said, "Oh, do you want to come and say hello to them?" so I was actually backstage with Mark and Mike as Tina Turner went on stage.
Wow. Hey, was this what, November of 86, 87?
87, November 87. I think it's November the 8th off the top of my head, yeah.
I was going to say that November because I remember hearing, I can't remember if I read it or if I heard it in an interview, but Level 42 actually had Thanksgiving in America with Tina Turner.
Ah, okay, right.
I would imagine they were shocked to see you just show up.
Yeah, really.
Who's this guy?
Well, I think it's bloody hell not him. We can't go anywhere.
Yeah, I'm wondering if they've ever said, hey, Julian, maybe you need a hobby or something. Has any one of the band members said that, anything like that to you?
Right. On one of my, it's either an album cover or a 12-inch. I think Mark's put "Leave Us Alone."
That's great. That is great. Well, on that note, we're thankful you've been to all those shows, Julian, because it's great to have a resource, both to just talk to and stuff that you've written and posted on YouTube that we can all go back and reflect on. It's awesome that it's there. If anybody wants to go check out Julian Hall's YouTube page, I believe it's Julian Hall at Julian Hall Level 42, all one word, no spaces. Julian, thank you so much for being here. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, this was great.
Thank you very much.
Just in relation to the YouTube thing, again, as far as I'm concerned, I now, a little bit like Mike posting so many things on his, I just feel I've almost got a duty now because, again, certainly people, I mean, Paul Nyman lives in the States, Sean Reed lives in Australia. Right. And I know these guys almost rely on me because they can't come and see the bands, live. I'll do a blog saying I'm going to such and such a gig, and they straight away say, "Oh, thank you so much," because you're particularly obviously being down the front at Southend. I'm bringing them a live concert almost, not obviously on the day. Yeah. But again, the community through YouTube and everything, I must admit, I don't need to say this, but I don't actually earn any, like Mike, I don't actually get any money at all for doing it. So it's a labor, It's definitely a labor of love. Yeah. But again, at Southend, 2 people came up to me and said, "Julian, thank you so much for what you do on YouTube." And somebody did the same. I was standing in the queue and somebody shook my hand and said, "I watch all your uploads. Just wanted to say thank you for keeping us." I've also been told several times that certainly my blogs and my stories, several people have said that it made them feel closer to the band.
Yeah.
Oh, awesome.
I would agree with that. Yeah. You've had so much interaction with them. I do think you got to give the band a lot of credit too, because they are very accessible and for the most part, very friendly. And it's great that you can talk to any one of these guys, and then if you can put it out there for other folks who may not have that opportunity, it's all good stuff. It's all good stuff. Well, Julian, thank you again. Really appreciate you being here today, and want to thank everybody who tuned in today. For Winston Walker, Mikey, the color of my pain, I'm Bob Considine. We are leaving you now, and we will wait till you return. See you next time on Turn It On.